Hey, what's going on, everybody? The Music Narrative here, back with episode 10 of my music history series. Today I'm going to be covering the 90s alternative rock band, Hum, so grab a snack and we'll dive into it. So, to preface before getting into things, Hum is an alternative rock band formed in the year 1989. They're mostly known for their hit single Stars, which came out in 1995, but there's a lot more to the band that people have yet to discover. Spanning over 30 years with 5 studio albums, the band is back in 2020 and are going stronger than ever before, so I figured it'd be perfect to open up a time capsule from the 1990s and tell the interesting story of the band Hum. So to me, Hum, they're one of those underrated gems of the 1990s. They were moderately successful, they weren't huge, but they weren't under the radar either. They got a decent amount of attention on MTV and a good amount of radio play, especially from their single Stars and their second single, The Pod. But they never really achieved what they should have achieved. They kind of were underrated in the sense that they came out with a lot of great music, but they were only known by mostly one song. They were a very good band, very solid. I feel like they were criminally underrated for their time, and there was a lot of music from that era that I would consider to be pretty bad. So yeah, now that that's out of the way, we can get into the formal history of the band Hum. Starting from the first year of them being a band, which is 1989, let's jump right into it. So the original lineup of Hum consisted of guitarist and vocalist Matt Talbot, Andy Switzky, Akiz Boyatzis, and Jeff Kropp. Matt and Andy met at Trino's Cafe in Illinois, where Andy worked, and they would engage in musical discussion. They would talk about various music that they liked, and they got along pretty well, the chemistry was there, and this led to the early formation of the band Hum. Both Matt and Andy previously played in bands. Matt came from the band We Ate Play-Doh, and Andy came from the moderately successful band Obvious Man. Eventually the name Hum was settled on, but there was a lot of names that were considered, including Grendel's Arm, Pod, and Feedbag. Akiz would move to Greece in 1990, ending his very brief tenure with the band, and Akiz was replaced by Joe Futrell, who was pretty much immediately replaced by Balti DeLay on amicable terms. Along came drummer Brian St. Pair. He would come into the picture around this time, and he would remain a consistent member to this day. Hum would record their first demo in Steve Albini's basement called Kissing Me Is Like Kissing an Angel, and in that same session, multiple songs that were recorded would later be used on the band's debut, and they were all recorded in 1 or 2 takes, and you can kind of tell. Many would consider Matt Talbot to be the iconic frontman of Hum, but at this time in their early days, Hum was actually fronted by Andy Switzky, and Matt Talbot, he sang on a few songs, but it was mostly kind of like going back and forth between him and Andy being the frontman. They kind of shared that position. This was only for a very brief time though. So shortly after this, bassist Balti DeLay left Hum on good terms to focus on his other band, Mother. Balti was replaced by Jeff Dempsey, whom Matt previously worked with, and the transition seemed to be very fluid, and 2 singles were recorded soon after for the songs Hello Kitty and Sundress. Andy, who was essentially the main frontman, would also depart from the band during this time due to creative differences, and guitarist Tim Lash took his place. So the 9 songs that Hum recorded with the OG lineup previously would come in the form of the band's debut in 1991. So, Hum's debut record is entitled Filet Show. Like the title, this album feels very undercooked. It is the band's first record, so naturally, they're still trying to find their sound at this point. It's very rough around the edges, and while that sound can work to a band's advantage, I feel like Hum wasn't really anything spectacular. I feel like this is very much an album that saw the band trying to find their sound and trying to find their strengths, what they did right. But yeah, either way, Filet Show is the band's debut, and it is kind of rough, but it is a decent starting point. Filet Show would be the only release to feature Andy Switzky as the frontman of Hum, and the album would also be the only to feature Balti DeLay. The album was recorded at Clubhouse Studio in Illinois, released on 12-inch records. Featuring only 9 tracks, this album is very post-hardcore oriented, being very straightforwardly heavy, mostly without the masterful melodic craft of later records. It's fast tempo, raw, and Andy gave Hum a completely different vibe. To me, Andy's voice just didn't fit the style Hum was meant to fulfill. If you listen to later Hum records, you would understand the niche that they were carving with their music and that very particular more kind of space rocky, heavy sound, and Andy just was not going to bring that to the table. And I don't feel like Andy offered much to Hum. I feel like if anything, Andy kind of made Hum sound mediocre, and Matt Talbot would be the one to kind of bring things together, bring Hum full circle, and give themselves a genuinely unique sound. But Matt does sing on a good amount of tracks here, and those moments are cool, but you really only hear the band trying to find their sound on this debut. It's very rough in some spots, but it's a solid starting point for what the band would eventually do later on. They're still in their infancy at this point. However, it's not terrible. It definitely showed moments of promise. So after the band's debut, the lineup of Hum remained pretty consistent after this. You had Matt Talbot, Tim Lash, Jeff Dempsey, and Brian St. Pierre. This lineup 30 years later would remain consistent. To this day, all 4 members are still in the band. But anyway, if you're at all interested in this record, I definitely recommend checking it out. It's kind of rough, but if you want to hear where Hum came from sound-wise, I would definitely recommend Fellatio. So with the classic lineup of Hum finally in place, work on the band's second album began in early 1993. Elektra 2000 would be the name of that record, and it was released on October 19, 1993, recorded at Idful Studios in Chicago, and produced by Brad Wood. The record would be primarily distributed by Cargo Music and spawned no singles. However, a music video was produced for the opening track, Ironclad Lou. The first run of the record was limited to 1,000 copies, but later would be expanded due to popular demand. But anyway, Elektra 2000, we're in the year 1993. Let's get into the sound of this record. It's much more leaning toward alternative, with some very sprawling melodic guitar work. Elektra 2000 is a major step up from Fellatio, showcasing Hum at their most intimately ferocious yet. Matt Talbot balances out the heaviness of the instrumentals so well with his mostly subdued vocals. The guitar tone obviously needs to be mentioned here. Hum is known for their very heavy, very gritty guitar sound, and you really hear that all over this record. It gives the album a heavy metal edge, but the style and attitude of alternative rock. Cuts like Pinch and Roll and Double Dip masterfully convey both the angry and passionate side of Hum. There's some truly heavy moments here that blow you away, while other moments are somewhat fragile and vulnerable. Elektra 2000 took the band to a new level, with genuine conviction in the writing and musicianship that would get them noticed by a larger audience. The label RCA looked into the growing promise of Hum, and after doing so, opted to sign them immediately. It was now in the band's hands to deliver their major label debut, which brought the pressure, but I think the band confidently had a unique sound nailed down that they would only expand upon. While Elektra 2000 isn't a masterpiece, I do really enjoy this record. A cut that I've always really liked is Shovel, and yeah, Elektra 2000, very much worth your time, very much worth your money. To me, this is the real starting point of Hum. So now we're going into 1995, You'd Prefer an Astronaut. Let's dive into it. So the band switched to a new producer by the name of Keith Cleversley for the band's third record. On April 11th, 1995, Hum's third album, You'd Prefer an Astronaut, was released. This record was recorded at Playground Studio in Chicago, and it saw the band at their most concise and creative yet, transcending all previous works. This is the record that proved the band had loads of talent, and it's demonstrated here numerous times. The best elements of Elektra 2000 are perfected on You'd Prefer an Astronaut, and the bar was raised tenfold. The best example of this is the band's hit, Stars. This track really put Hum on the map, and it received heavy airplay throughout the US, charting at number 11 on the Hot Modern Rock Tracks chart. Musically, Stars is incredibly catchy, while simultaneously being unforgivingly heavy, mostly due to the pummeling guitar tone which became a staple of the band. The record's second single, The Pod, furthers the spacey sound of Stars, continuing the heavy melodic tone, done in such a way only Hum could have delivered. There was a third single as well, I'd Like Your Hair Long, which is also a great track. Hum displays punchy guitars here with soft moments that make it an interesting cut all around. Other noteworthy moments to me include Little Dipper, the droney opener, along with I Hate It Too, which showcases the quiet to loud dynamics of the record so effortlessly. Hum had the attitude and style of grunge, but truly carved their own unique sound, uncomparable to essentially every band of the time. You'd Prefer an Astronaut was a critical and commercial success for Hum, selling over 250,000 copies since its release. Though these numbers are relatively low for 90s standards, the band did this solely based on the promise of Stars, which was a pretty impressive feat. The song is truly just that good. Stars would continue to be culturally relevant, being featured in commercials and Beavis and Butthead. It's unfortunate the pod mostly failed to resonate with a mainstream audience, as I feel it's just as great of a song, or even better. To speak on the influence of You'd Prefer an Astronaut, Chino Moreno of Deftones was quoted as saying, "This is a heavy record, and it's where Deftones get a big part of our influence from, tone-wise." Hum spent much of 1996 on tour and would begin recording their next record in 1997. Fans were wondering what direction Hum would take and what they would do next. By 1998, all these questions would be answered. The band's follow-up to You'd Prefer an Astronaut came in the form of Downward is Heavenward, released on January 27, 1998. Did this record live up to the popularity of the previous record? No. Downward is Heavenward failed to achieve even a sliver of the success they had endured a few years prior. The lead-off single Comin Home was mildly successful, peaking at number 37 on the Billboard Modern Rock Tracks chart. While nowhere near as relevant as they were, the band still kept trucking along. The mainstream success was mostly a thing of the past, but the band still came through and delivered a very superb record. Regarded by many as one of the best rock albums of the late 90s, I wouldn't argue with that, and it certainly continues the path You'd Prefer an Astronaut laid out for the band. It's very much in the same lane, not stepping too far out of their comfort zone, but it's still very good. Tracks like If You Are to Bloom and Green to Me are energetic and fast-paced, making you nod your head, while cuts like Apollo are introspective and withdrawn, making the record well-balanced and varied, with big ups and big downs musically. There's really not much to complain about with Downward is Heavenward. While it may not hit the very sweet spots You'd Prefer an Astronaut did, it's still consistently great with some real standout moments. Downward is Heavenward sold a mere 30,000 copies, a steep decrease in sales from just a couple years before. Having missed multiple opportunities to reach a wider audience, including recording a cover for an X-Files soundtrack, the band was dropped by RCA in 2000 due to poor sales and lack of interest in the group. The last straw for Hum came at the end of 2000, when the band got into an accident in their van while touring in Canada. The band proceeded to play their final performances, wrapping up their tenure on December 31, 2000, with a show in Chicago. Hum's 11-year run had come to an end. To me, this is one of the bleakest, saddest endings to a band in the history of rock music. Out of their contract, waning interest in their music, and a van accident. I now see why they called it quits. But the good news is, this wasn't quite the end. Hum reformed multiple times over the years. In 2003, the band played a slew of one-off shows throughout the summer, including a performance at Furnace Fest. Allegedly, the band only did these shows for a high price, and the organizers, of course, had to oblige. From 2005 to 2013, the band played shows here and there, including the occasional club appearance, and sometimes they would play festivals too, with no plans of recording new material. In 2015, Hum opened for Failure on a brief tour, and also went on a tour with Mineral that same year. Brian St. Pierre left Hum during this time, realizing it was a mistake, shortly rejoining the band. Along came the confirmation that made fans very happy. Hum were finally recording new music. This was great news for fans, and many were very ecstatic. Fast forward a few years later in 2020, begins the next chapter of Hum. Recorded periodically over the course of 3 to 5 years, Hum's first album since 1998 came in the form of Inlet just a few months ago in 2020. Inlet was released as a surprise record on Bandcamp and came out on June 23rd of this year. On Earth Analog Records and produced by the band themselves, Inlet sees Hum continue their iconic sound, but also translating it into a more modern style. It really feels like Hum never left for as long as they did with Inlet. It's a natural progression of their sound. The guitar tone is still gritty and thick, the spacey vibe is still here, along with Matt Tailbot's iconic vocal delivery. This record very much feels on the side of alternative metal rather than rock. Most of these tracks are ruthless and heavy through and through. The opener, Waves, kicks things off on a strong note, right off the bat. Interesting and layered production that feels bloated but in a way that suits Hum. There's a number of exceedingly long cuts here, including Desert Rambler and The Summoning, both of which are nearly 10 minutes. I would be lying if I said these tracks captivate me entirely from start to finish. It's very experimental and covering new ground for the band. After all, you do have to take risks with your music, especially when you've been a band for 30 plus years. One of my favorite moments on Inlet is Step Into You, which is the most straightforward cut and delivery, but so catchy, well performed, and certainly the Hum fans have come to love over the years. While 2020's Inlet isn't a perfect record, it's a solid return to form that has definitely impressed longtime fans, which is commendable in itself. Most thought a new Hum record would never come, including me, and Inlet proved everyone wrong with a pretty solid entry into the band's discography. Hum was a unique band within a sea of mostly mainstream mediocrity when they achieved their peak success in 1995. The style in which the band perfected is entirely their own, and their innovation has been recognized for decades. The band's return this year has proven that time and age has not decimated their creativity. Hopefully in the future, the legacy of Hum will be forged in the history books and forever looked back on fondly. Their contributions to metal and rock may be overlooked by many, but for those who dig deeper, will be rewarded by the band's truly original style and terrific music that will keep you coming back time and time again. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Definitely check out You'd Prefer an Astronaut, and especially Downward is Heavenward. I'm sure you've heard Stars on the radio at least once or twice over the years. I still hear it from time to time. And yeah, this was a very interesting band to cover, and I really hope that you got something out of the video. What's your favorite Hum album? Comment down below. Discussion is always encouraged. Thanks for watching. More music-related content coming soon here on The Music Narrative. Next week, I'll be covering the band Acetone, very well-known slowcore tinged band. So if you're at all interested, if you like Acetone, definitely stop by next week and give that a watch if you're interested. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys later. Bye.